All right, a couple thoughts on the new 49ers hire, Brandon Staley, here from the farm, because I see so many people getting this wrong online, and especially Chargers fans who are coming into 49ers comment section and saying, oh, you guys got a terrible coach. Your franchise is going downhill. Guys, that's a terrible take. The 49ers did not hire Brandon Staley to be their head coach. Trust me, Kyle Shanahan is still the 49ers head coach. They didn't even hire Brandon Staley to be their defensive coordinator. Brandon Staley's going to be a whiteboard guy. He's going to be an assistant that is helping out with scheme. And guess what? He's already proven that he's good at that. In 2020, Brandon Staley was a defensive coordinator of the Rams. They were the best defense in football by a country mile. Even into his time with the Chargers, people around the league talk about how good Brandon Staley was at scheming defenses up. He's a Vic Fangio disciple. He worked with Vic Fangio before he was the defensive coordinator of the Rams and then the head coach of the Chargers. And the 49ers know that Fangio's a good DC. 49ers had Fangio back in the Jim Harbaugh era. Staley's going to run a 3-4. He's going to run cloud coverages, kind of a disguise. He'll run some cover 3, but it'll be disguised as cover 2, cover 4, vice versa. And the 49ers hope that he can take some of that schematic prowess and apply it to their defense. But he's not going to be doing it from a defensive coordinator role. That's the difference between this year and last year when it didn't work with Steve Wilks. With Steve Wilks, you brought in a guy with outside ideas. And you made him the DC, but you didn't let him bring any of his assistants. And because of that, it was like fitting a square peg into a round hole. Steve Wilks and the 49ers were not capable of making it work properly last year. But here, this is a chance at a much more delicate infusion of new ideas because, again, Brandon Staley's going to be on the whiteboard in the background. He's not going to have to be operating with people leadership skills like he would at the head coach position. Being a head coach in the NFL is a whole lot different than being a coordinator, or even much more different than being some kind of lower level assistant. As a head coach, you have to worry about the whole roster. You have to delegate responsibilities. You have to make in-game decisions. You have to be the CEO. That's not what the 49ers are asking Brandon Staley to do. You have to judge him by his schematic abilities and his ability to integrate with the rest of the 49ers staff. And that's what the interview process was for. They used the interview process to judge Brandon Staley's ability to do that, to mesh with somebody like Nick Sorensen. Now, I think one of the questions is, can Nick Sorensen call plays, since he's never done that at any level? I think that's the bigger question about the situation at hand. The 49ers obviously believe so because they love Sorensen's versatile background. You watch some of the mic'd up footage with him with the Seattle Seahawks. Maybe that's something I could show you a little bit later. Seems like he's a fiery leader on the field. He used to be a quarterback in college before switching positions to become a fiery special teams player for several years in the NFL. The 49ers believe that Nick Sorensen has the chops to call plays, just like they believed in Robert Saleh back in 2017 and DeMeco Ryans back in 2021. Those guys were first-time defensive coordinators at the time too. But as it relates to Brandon Staley, this guy's not here to call plays for the 49ers. He is here to give insight, to help build the game plan. And that's something that he's done a very good job at before. Even with the Chargers, they had a defense without Joey Bosa and without J.C. Jackson, their cornerback, back in 2022. 49ers were roaring offensively. That was after the Christian McCaffrey trade. Chargers were down to only 3 healthy defensive tackles. They come into Levi Stadium on Sunday Night Football, and they held Christian McCaffrey to 2.7 yards per carry. It's another thing that Brandon Staley's going to do. He's going to mix up his fronts. So, again, he's not the defensive coordinator, but he has shown the ability to play with multiple fronts. He has shown the schematic command, the prowess to use multiple fronts, multiple different coverages. It's simply just a good infusion of brain power into the coaching staff with little downside. Because this guy's not in a high enough role to go and commandeer what the 49ers are doing in a way that they don't want him to commandeer it. Again, that's the big difference between this season and last season. Last season, Steve Wilks came into that defensive coordinator role. He was in a very high role to begin with. Brandon Staley's not. Works for him because, he gets to be with a good franchise under a respected coaching staff, and he has a chance to rehabilitate his image. And if you look at what Chargers fans are saying about Brandon Staley right now, well, he could use some image rehabilitation. I think in coaching circles, it's not nearly as dire. I think the understanding is that he's just not as good of a head coach as he is a coordinator, and he could work his way back up that ladder, but there were no other coordinator positions available besides this one for Brandon Staley. The 49ers didn't hire him because they want to keep that scheme. They want to keep the 4-3, and they don't want to go to a 3-4. They want to bring in somebody who's got ideas to diversify fronts, to diversify the back end, but they don't necessarily want to take the plunge to fully go in that direction. You look at San Francisco, they are the number 12 defense by EPA per play coming out of the season. They were number 1 the year before. Thought the talent was even better for San Francisco this past year before, even though they dropped off, and that was unacceptable. That's the main reason why Steve Wilkes is no longer around. I mean, he could have not meshed perfectly well with Shanahan, but if the results had been there over the course of the regular season, 49ers would have happily kept him, but they didn't. They decided to turn the page, move forward, and now they're going to have Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley working behind the scenes. You get the continuity of the guy that's already on the staff, and then you get the outside ideas, the infusion of new coaching talent from Brandon Staley. It is very rare to get somebody who was an NFL head coach just the year prior to a lower level position on your coaching staff the very next year. Speaks to what the 49ers have going right now. It speaks to the fact that this is a desirable place to come and coach football, that they've, built not just a coaching reputation rehab program, kind of like they do with the quarterbacks, right, with Sam Darnold and maybe somebody else moving forward in that QB2 spot. But with the coaches, you have a good reputation of developing coaches to the point where coach like Brandon Staley can reasonably sign up with the 49ers and say, hey, maybe in a year the league will recognize some of the work I've done here. I'll be in a better spot to land another defensive coordinator job. That's the idea. The idea is that everybody can win in this situation with the 49ers. So all the hysterics on social media, just give me a break. This was 49ers probably gave Bill Belichick a call, and he almost certainly said no. We said that from the very start. Pete Carroll hasn't called a defense in years. It's been a really, really long time since Pete Carroll's actually called the defense. In Seattle, they strayed away from the 4-3, cover 3, the 49ers wanted to stick with. 49ers probably tried to pry Jeff Ulbrich away from the New York Jets, but that's up to the Jets. The Jets would have had to say, okay, it's okay for him to break contract. He didn't. So the 49ers went in-house to Nick Sorensen, a guy that they really believe in, who's had some time to season, who's done good work for the 49ers in that turnover margin department, working those ball meetings, the ball father, and they decided to infuse some outside thoughts with Brandon Staley to help fortify the defensive brain trust. Makes total sense, makes too much sense. I think a lot of people are just bored right now, maybe a little upset 3 weeks after the Super Bowl. So they're having to make some rash claims. But we'll stay rational and we'll stay correct on this channel. I think that is most important.